Same of
Thank you.
Two happy is enough.
so this is the topic that I find super interesting from a number of angles. Firstly, we see, first of all, it's an extremely practical shayla halacha l'maaseh that if you're a father of a household, you probably get every year. So it's extremely practical, but at the same time, it's extremely complex. The answer is somewhat vague. So hopefully we'll provide some clarity, at least halacha l'maaseh, from the Rabbanim that I've consulted with. Also, from another perspective, it's quite interesting. In this sugya, you'll see how Chazal make certain statements and how the Chachamim of the later generations apply that to modern technology and modern plumbing, and how the halacha is interpreted in the modern world. As well, another interesting angle that comes out in this sugya is an interesting difference between the way the Olam HaCharedi approaches a halacha and the extra sensitivity that's given to the words of Chazal. First, the way some, to be careful the way I say this, some very important modern Orthodox poskim view something in halacha, and you see a certain very interesting sensitivity to the way we approach something from Chazal from those two perspectives, even though obviously we're all from a Yidden, but it's interesting the way this has ramifications halacha l'maaseh. I know we have to stop at 12 o'clock for the rally, so we'll try to fit what we could in within an hour, and hopefully we'll come away with some practical takeaways. Okay, so I think last year, Sukkot, we also spoke about water. We spoke about why the minhag Chabad is to sit in the sukkah despite the rain. This year, we're also going to talk about water from another angle, and water is obviously an important part of the yontif of Sukkot. They did the Nisach HaMayim, and with all its important ramifications. So Bechlal, Hilchas Shabbos is complicated, and if you think Hilchas Shabbos is complicated, Hilchas Yontif is Hilchas Shabbos on steroids. In parentheses, the Talmud Yerushalmi says that if you think Hilchas Yontif is complicated, Hilchas Cholamoid is even more complicated. So we'll talk about an area in Hilchas Yontif, which is primarily in Simin Tov Kuf Yud Aleph, the first sif in the Shulchan Aruch. That's the Marmakim. For those that want, there are still some Marmakim in the middle of the table for those that don't have. In the interest of time, we'll probably read some of the more primary sources inside, the Gemaras and the Rishonim, and the Achronim I'm probably going to read outside. Okay, so it all starts with the pasuk in Chumash, and Parshas Emor, Perek Yud Beis. The pasuk says about Yontif, source 1, and by Yom HaRishon, Mikra Kodesh, by Yom HaShvi, Mikra Kodesh, Yalachem Kol Malacha, Le'yayasa B'hem. And then, so the pasuk talks about first day of Yontif, I think it's Pesach, and then it says what types of malachas are mutter and Yontif, but the exception is that the following categories of malachas are mutter and Yontif of the 39 malachas. Asher ye'ochel l'chol nefesh hu levadei ye'osa lochem. Malachas which are involved in the food preparation, generally speaking, are permissible on Yontif minat Torah, and the pasuk says l'chol nefesh, things that are applicable l'chol nefesh. So there's a whole Masechta in Gemara that's dedicated to the hilchos of halachos of Yontif, Masechtas Beya. So throughout Masechtas Beya, we have an ongoing machlokes between the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel regarding some very fundamental questions. So here's one example, and we'll see another example in source 3. and we'll wrap it all together with one general theme that differentiates Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So the Mishnah says Beis Shammai. The Mishnah says Beis Shammai says La yachem adam chamin leraglov. A person, according to Beis Shammai, should not heat up water for their feet. Only if the water that they're going to use for their feet was also fit for drinking. And we'll see the way Tosfos interprets the word Ru'uyim in a minute. But the way Tosfos understands it, it's actually was actually prepared for drinking, and you had a little leftover. So Beis Shammai says you can use it to wash your feet as well. Beis Hillel takes a more lenient approach, and Beis Hillel says a person is allowed to even lechatchila heat up water on yontif to wash their feet. Mishnah then gives another example in the way the Gemara understands this. This is according to the opinion of Beis Hillel that oisa adam maduda umischamen kenegda, that even the pasuk said you're allowed to heat up water for food purposes, but Beis Hillel says you're also allowed to heat up water for heat purposes. Let's see now another example in the Mishnah and Hatzvi-Bais. Beis Shammai oimrim ein moitziin loyas hakoton v'loyas halulav. So the Torah permits you to carry on yontif if it's to help your seudah, and Beis Shammai says, but you're not allowed to carry something. It's time to carry a child around or to carry a lulav around. And again, Beis Hillel says you're allowed to carry, even if it's just to carry the child and it's not for an eating purpose. So the Gemara analyzes this and lays out a fundamental rule in understanding the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Toni Tana kamed Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi hashoichet olas nedarva b'yontif loike. According to one opinion, if you're allowed to shecht an animal on yontif, strictly speaking, but it's only an animal that you can eat from. If it's an oilo, which you don't eat from, you wouldn't be allowed to shecht it on yontif. This is according to the opinion of Beis Shammai that says you're not allowed to shecht an animal on yontif if it's not something which you're going to eat. It's not interesting. Someone was pointing out to me that we're mitzvah preparing for the days of Mashiach. So a practical nafkamina between the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel is the beginning of Masechta Shabbos. There's a famous machlokes if you're allowed to, if your vessels are allowed to do malacha. Beis Shammai says not, and therefore, according to Shammai, candle lighting on Shabbos would be a problem. So therefore, the Rishonim say, I think the Ran points out that according to Shammai, you had to actually disown your utensil or your candelabra before Shabbos in order to light it before Shabbos, in order that you're not going to have an issue of lighting that your vessel is doing a malacha on Shabbos. So get ready for that in Mitzvah Shem soon. So the Gemara says, so what's the underlying thing between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? So Beis Hillel says, so a certain list of malachas, again, it's not across the rule board. I'll give you an example. You're not allowed to write. If let's say you have a cookie on Yontif that has words on it. So we don't always say that you could. It's not these rules don't apply to all the malachas. You can't break a cookie with words on it on Yontif because it's part of Echol Nefesh. So all these rules have exceptions to the rules, and you have to learn Hilchas Yontif well. But a general rule is that many of the malachas, for example, Eitzah and Ha'avodah and so on and so forth, and Bishul, one, just like we permitted it according to Hillel for cooking, we also permitted it for other needs like warming yourself up and so on and so forth. And that's where it's going to lead us to the discussion about Shabbos. So in source 4, Tosfos asked the question I already pointed out. He says, according to Beis Shammai, it has to be that you actually, the water that you're going to use to heat yourself had to actually been water that you heated up in your urn, or you heated up on Yontif for drinking, and that what was left over, Beis Shammai says you'd be allowed to do. But here comes the important description according to Tosfos, and he says that even according to Beis Hillel, we didn't always allow you any need. In other words, just like we allowed you to cook. And just to point out, when we say cook, there's two malachas that are involved in heating up water, which would be heating up water for a shower as well. One is the malacha of lighting the flame. That's havara. It's one of the 39 malachas. Another of the 39 malachas, even once the flame's lit, there's a second malacha of cooking. So actually, there's two potential malachas involved in heating up water. So Tosfos in the bottom of source 4 says that even according to Beis Hillel, we only permit heating for non-food needs if it's a certain type of need. And that's going to be really the crux of what we're going to try to discuss. What's the definition of that need which Beis Hillel allowed you to heat up water, for example, for a non-food related need? So Tosfos says, "V'dafke l'raglov," we specifically allowed you to heat up water, violating, like I said, those two malachas of cooking and of lighting a flame. If you're doing that too, and just to point out, obviously, according to most opinions, it would be an issur that abonon, meaning some say it's an issur that araisa. According to the way we paskin, it's an issur that abonon to light a flame on yontif. So therefore, obviously, from a pre-existing flame, there's an issue of moilid. But to light a flame, according to Beis Hillel, for the needs of to wash your body, for example, are only permissible to wash your feet. We'll see about other parts of the body in a minute. But to wash your entire body, the Beis Hillel agree that wouldn't be allowed. Why? Because when did the Beis Hillel say that the Chazal extended the permission to light to benefit and to cook on Yom Tov for non-food related needs? To davar hashav l'chol nefesh. It has to be something that's a universal need. It has to be something that everyone needs. Everyone needs is what we're going to be working on understanding the exact definition of that. Those people that need a full body hot shower are specifically people that require extra pleasure, extra comfort, but it's not something that everyone needs. Tosfos then adds, but to wash your hands and your feet, Tosfos adds, and now hands, that's something that's permissible for everyone. So the Sefer HaChinuch, one of the great Rishonim, he wrote a special Sefer for his son that didn't have a lot of zitzfleish, as we know. And he needed an interesting Sefer. So it's actually a fascinating Sefer. He talks about Yom Tov, and in his mitzvah about Yom Tov, mitzvah reish tzaddik ches, he says a lot of fascinating in Yom about Yom Tov. And he says that Yom Tov is a time to learn, and especially Chol Hamoed, and therefore the Chazal say you shouldn't work, in order that you should be relaxed and you should have the headspace to be able to learn. So everyone's here learning, Baruch Hashem. But then he says, he gets into the longest of what does it mean shav l'chol nefesh? What's a universal need? So he says, "V'dafke binyanim elu be'inon sheyeh inyan shav b'chol adam." אבל לעניין אוכלן אפילו מייכל שאין דרך לעשייסי אלא המלאכים והשרים הגדולים מותר לעשייס עשי כל אדם דמקומקם עיקר אכילס דבר השווה בכל נפש. So what he says is like this. He says, Beis Hillel said that a malacha that's done for food, so he says that when it comes to food, you can really cook whatever you want. You go to some, I wrote Pesach in the Bahamas. I hear reports, I was never there. I hear you go to some of these Pesachs, you can have 5 or 6 course meals are the norm. And the types of food you have are extremely fancy. So one can say, wait a second, didn't Chazal only allow us to cook for a universal need? So the Chinuch says that specifically when we're extending it to non-food items. But by food items, because the category of food is so important, so therefore, even if it's a non-essential food, that would always be allowed on Yom Tov. Okay, that's now just a zaytik point. But now the question is, so what if you're, how exactly do we categorize this halacha? So source 6 is Rashi commenting on a Gemara in Be'ed Daf Beis. I did not bring the Gemara. I should have, but I didn't bring it. You can look it up. A very interesting Gemara. You have a Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Machlokes Rav and Shmuel regarding we permit you to shecht animals on Yom Tov. There was a novel that I read when I was a bocher. It's a famous book where he is. It's a what? The Jewish novel, where he describes how people would, in the times of Chazal, how they would do things, and how it ties with the halacha. So he was bringing up a very practical conundrum that how do you catch an animal? How do you catch an animal and not make it a treifa? In other words, usually most of these traps that you make, essentially, if the trap works properly, the animal is going to become a treifa, and you're not going to be able to shecht it. So many of these wild animals, the practical ramifications of catching them and then shechting them are not so practical. So the Indian of actually shechting a deer is a bit of an anomaly. But so the Gemara talks about what happens. So most people didn't get deers because it wasn't, it was hard to a big cow you can take it and shecht it. But deers were more of a rare commodity. So what happens if so the Gemara says so most people didn't end up eating deer meat. But what happens if you did? The Gemara says, are you allowed to shecht the deer on Yom Tov? So Rav says you can't. Shmuel says you could. How do we paskin? Anochas Yom Tov. Like Rav. So I'm sorry, the other way around. Sorry, halach is that you could. So we paskin like what? Shmuel Amar Mutter.
It is an exception to every rule. Halach is like
Okay, yeah, we would paskin like Rav in this case. Shmuel says it's Mutter. Okay, so I don't remember how we paskin. Probably we're paskin like Rav. So, but we're going to say that it's a problem. But in analyzing that discussion,
allowing people to trap to kill the deer in Fish Park this week. So,
yes, they're now for the next 2 months they're capturing animals. So the question is, what's the machlokes Rav and Shmuel? So Rashi explains. We'll see that the Meiri highlights this in source 8. He explains that's very interesting. He says that everyone agrees that according to Beis Hillel, Rabbi and Shmuel are Me'aroyim. They obviously can't argue with Beis Hillel. So everyone generally, Rav Tanu Polig, but okay, but we're working within the framework of Beis Hillel. So everyone agrees that you need a universal need. The question is, what's universal? So Rashi says according to Shmuel that it's mutter. So Rav is going to say eating deer is not universal because most poor people don't eat deer. It's not a universal need. It's a luxury item, and therefore to do shchita for that wouldn't be allowed. But Rashi says according to Shmuel, even the poor people, if they would get a deer, it would be interesting to them, which means that it could be universal. And the Meiri talks this out in source 8. He says if there's something that if the poor person had access to, they would enjoy, that could be universal and would be allowed on Yom Tov. And it would be allowed on Yom Tov.
Maybe it's in the access that it's financially it's not that expensive, right? Certain foods you can't get because it's only a rich man's food. You have to pay for it. Here, it's practical.
Right. It's not practical, and if theoretically they had the right tools to hunt it, they would be correct. Yeah. So yeah, that's probably the pshat.
It's like what the Meiri, I think what the Meiri is saying is like golfing. The rich man golfs, so it's like a shmak hazak. But the Malan man realizes it's important, so he doesn't do it. You wouldn't do it even if you had access to it. Even if you paid the membership, what's the problem? Huh? What's
I heard, why rich people take their business partners golfing? It's to see because it's very easy to cheat in golf. So they want to see, is this someone I can trust? Because there's so many opportunities to cheat. They want to see if this is a trustworthy person. Okay, so it's interesting. So according to Rav, who we paskin like, might not accept this point. So halakha l'maisa, this detail of the universal need for the poor person, we halakha l'maisa, we might take that a step further. Okay, so let's dig a little further in this definition of universal need. And the poskim do grapple with this, particularly in relation to this question about showers. We're going to see the Shulchan Aruch in a minute, but essentially, the Shulchan, let's talk practically. The Shulchan Aruch, let's look at it now. The Shulchan Aruch, in source 20, look at page 5. The Shulchan Aruch, it says like this, just to lay the groundwork. The Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to heat up fire, literally make a fire on Yontif, lahachim b'Yontif mayim lirchas yadav, to wash your hands, and the way the Alter Rebbe and all the poskim and the Mishnah Berurah point out, your hands, your feet, and your face. It's permissible to heat up water 100% without no one argues on this, to heat it up. Avaloi kol gufoi, but not to wash your whole body. Okay, we'll come to the rest of that sip in a second. Let's go back now to the universal needs. And the way everyone explains this is because the reason the face, the hands, and the feet are permissible is because it's a universal need. Therefore, you could heat up water, you could turn on your water on Yontif and wash your hands to your heart's desire. Mahadrin min mahadrin. Same thing with your feet. Same thing with your face. Now, the question then becomes, why not the rest of the body? 1 second. So all the commentaries say because it's not a universal need. So the question is, why not? Seemingly today, this is what everyone's dealing with. Seemingly, why is it not a universal need? Seemingly, there's many people that take 1 shower a day, 2 showers a day, maybe even more. Yes.
Heating up water to wash dishes. Is this
The flow is yes. As long as it's for that day. And Yontif, you can heat up water to wash dishes. Yeah.
from a regular tap?
Yeah. So there's an interesting diuk in the Alter Rebbe, but generally speaking, yes. Okay. So Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky, for Lubavitchers that know a little bit of Lubavitcher history, he's an interesting author and Rav and Rosh Hashiva. He almost became the Rosh Hashiva by Lubavitch by the Frierdiker Rebbe in I think Tafresh Ayin Aleph. But for some reason he wasn't hired at the end, but he was very close to the Rabbeim, and he wrote a very famous sefer called Chazon Yecheskel on the Tosefta. So in his commentary to the Tosefta and the Chidushim, he attempts to understand why today we can't take showers. He lived in London. He didn't just live in Europe. He lived amongst more advanced society. What happens? He says like this.
10 years.
What?
No, it's a mistake.
Oh, sorry, 1976. No. Okay. So Be'inon shetehei davar ashor l'chol nefesh dum yedei chol nefesh k'may rechitzas yadav v'raglov. So what does he say? He says a chiddush. He says it's only going to be considered a universal need. But if he says kolbuf for washing your whole body is not allowed on Yontif. Why? Chazal said it has to be something that everyone does daily, and because taking daily showers, at least in the 50s, 1976, well, he wrote this the Tosefta probably in the 30 years before that, was not something that was universal, and therefore only super wealthy people, super finicky people take showers daily. Therefore, it's not davar shel chol nefesh. So Shlomo Zalman Auerbach questions this Hagdara in a sefer that his Talmidim wrote called Shulchan Shlomo. He asks, for those that want to look up the sources more carefully, it's source 7. The Gemara talks about, we know the first paragraph, Ksubas talks about the Be'ilah Rishona, the first intimate relation that a husband and wife have, and then talks about, is that allowed to be done on Shabbos? And there's a whole long discussion about that. So in that discussion, the Gemara says it's allowed to be done on Yontif, because potentially you're hurting the wife, which could be violating one of the Lamates Malachas. So the Gemara says it's permissible because it's a universal need, and it's permissible to do it on Shabbos, at least in the discussion of the Gemara. So we know that generally intimate relations is not something that you do every day. The Gemara uses this exact discussion to apply it to Tashmish, and therefore Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, at least for those that wanted to say that the definition of Shavah L'Chol Nefesh, universal need, is something that's done daily, he struggles with that definition based on that Gemara, and he quotes other Gemaras as well that imply that it does not have to be daily to become universal. Okay. The Chud Shoni of Nissen Karelitz. So, Nissen Karelitz, I hope you won't throw a sroigim on me. He's a nephew of the Chazon Ish, a very important Paisik, a contemporary Paisik. What? Extra largest sroigim. Okay. So he says like this. He says something interesting, and we'll see a little more from him a couple sources later. He says that the Rambam in Hilchos Deis, and this is going to be a theme that we're going to be seeing throughout, at least the way the Charedish Poskim analyze this discussion. How did Chazal view this activity? He says that the Rambam in Hilchos Deis said that a shower is something that is done weekly, and therefore showers beyond that are something which are bonus activities, extracurricular activities. So therefore, the weekly shower, obviously everyone's going to take a shower before Yom Tov. So a shower beyond that, he's going to consider something to be extra. So here, before we jump to Rabbi Nissen Karelitz, let's go back a few hundred years to the Beis Meir, a very important Paisik in Orach Chaim and in Yeridea. What? Nissim, not Nissen. Thank you. So
I don't want to quote a mom, so
I think the Ami magazine did an article on which the sukkahs. I'm sure
beyond his, the svara or the chesed of Ramsey, it's nothing to do with the Gemaras. In other words, he's saying it's you take a shower once. To take more than once a week is not Shavah Chol Nefesh. For parts like you're saying, you took it out of Yom Tov. It doesn't make a difference that in the Gemara comment on Ner for Nemo. The bottom line is taking it more than once is not Shavah Chol Nefesh. That's what I'm saying. So it's not like it's only the Gemara. It's a pislada. If you're saying that you only need to take it once a week, and now I already took it out of Yom Tov, so taking it on Yom Tov is already not Shavah Chol Nefesh, because you can't say, well, something I do 5 times at once, but then it becomes Shavah Chol Nefesh every time.
Right.
Could have. That's what he's saying.
Right. I mean, to defend Rabbi Abramsky, Stama Svara, and it could be this is along the lines of Rabbi Yoltan is saying, that you're dealing with many different categories of activities, and you're balancing needs versus wants and universal versus non-universal, and we're trying to make rules. So obviously it's a very complicated project, but for sure certain activities are going to be put on a higher pedestal than other activities. And we're dealing with Bachram over here, so I'm not going to get into too much detail, but Oifin Klali, eating is one type of activity, showering is another type of activity, and tashmish is another type of activity. And there's balancing levels of needs between a husband and a wife, which halacha puts on a very, very high, important level. And then there's a shower, and then there's eating sushi. So comparing and contrasting these things, I think you can easily differentiate between once a week and more than once a week, and there's what you can do to try to balance out some of these things. And possibly, Rabbi Abramsky can say when it comes to showers, maybe it has to be daily in order to become universal, but for tashmish, maybe once a week already makes it universal. V'yesh la'ayin oit. Okay.
Something else. I think there's a major difference between the Rambam's showers and our showers also. And the way the Rambam describes the shower that goes once a week is very different than the showers that we're taking today.
They didn't want to take a shower.
Yeah.
I don't know. Good. Okay, so that's going to get that's a good segue into the Beis Meir. So the Beis Meir and the Pnei Yeshua already preceded him by 100 years, making a similar comment. You could think someone comes to the sugya, he's a little bacher now in 2023. He says, what do they know about showers? Today we take showers, we have 5 types of conditioners and 10 types of this and that and the other. So he says, he quotes the Gemara in Shabbos, which talks about the whole Gezeh. I'm not going to read the Beis Meir's hub, but you can see it inside. And he says that Amol people were the shower was a super important event in their life. It was a whole matzav. And therefore the people were fighting the sages, and they were going to go secretly and light Xeris Marchetzois. People were needed their showers potentially more than we needed our showers today, because they were maybe even more dirty. And the shower was such an important activity. It was almost like probably on the top of the list. And when you showered, no one could disturb you about anything. We know before davening, you start showering, you're not going to finish. So their experience of a shower was very, very important. So says the Beis Meir based on that, but he says nonetheless, he says people did take showers. So don't think that we know more about showers. But he says, nonetheless, let's read the line inside. It's important. So he others did disagree with his opinion, but he says like this. He says there's those that need their showers, and in every society you have those people that are like mufunokim and adukim to their showers. But he says now take the regular person. He says there were just some people like that, but he says you have to take the non-shower fanatic and ask him how strongly connected are to your shower. Is it a luxury or is it non-luxury? And he says universal has to be that everyone is strongly connected to the shower. And because that you had shower fanatics wasn't by everybody. There was a strong, I don't know, majority, minority, there was a strong group of people that were not adukim to the shower, therefore it doesn't become a universal need. So the Beis Meir basically says, even if everyone's doing it, or if most people are doing it, you'll see the next source, the Pnei Megadim says, we only need the majority, we don't need everybody, we need a Rav. Rav is considered kol, universal, doesn't have to be everybody, it has to be the majority. He says, nonetheless, it has to be that everybody doesn't just enjoy it, but everybody strongly wants it. I'm not going to use the word needs, but everyone strongly is adukim to their shower. And until you reach that, so obviously everyone is adukim to eating. Obviously, everyone is adukim to tashmish, but to showers, that's in his understanding, it doesn't go to that extent. So we'll summarize what comes out from this in a second. But the chut shoni. So according to what we have over here, at least according to the Beis Meir, if you make a poll, so we don't necessarily need daily showers, but how important is a shower? Is a shower universal? You're obviously going to have certain people that are going to say, if I took a shower at Yom Tov 3 days later, I need the shower. But in order for halacha to say you can take a full hot shower 3 days after you already took another shower, 2 days after you took another shower, according to the Beis Meir, you're going to need that the majority of people need it, not just that they want it. And therefore, until you hit that point, you're not going to yet be allowed to take a shower. There are modern Orthodox poskim. I know Lamosher of Herschel Schechter, for example. I heard from his Talmud, a friend of mine. And he says that Rabbi Schechter allows taking hot showers on Yom Tov, because he feels that today in America, and there's another Pnei Megadim I didn't quote, he says this goes by localities. In the 5 towns, is not going to have the same halachas as Bnei Brak, at least in terms of showers. So therefore, in Washington Heights or wherever he's the Rav, so he feels that at least for the people in his cultured upper class community, everyone needs a shower on the 3rd day of Yom Tov. So therefore, that would be permissible. But again, as we're going to see, 99.9% of poskim disagree with this notion, and I'll drive home that point hopefully in the next 30 minutes. Okay, so the chut shoni, again, we quoted him earlier. He makes another interesting point, and he says it's a chiddush, but it's something that needs to be, you need to reckon with it.
Why?
He says,
Really? He's saying shkusim. I have to reckon. The Chachamim decided, we're not taking the same shower, we're not talking the same shower. The Rambam's talking about going into a shower that's a process, a cold, a hot.
You're saying their shower was more
Why,
than
why is a shower? Think about this. Why is a shower more needed nowadays than in time for the Rambam? So nowadays, I'll tell you what.
I'll tell you what.
2 minutes later, you're back out.
So I didn't fully paint this picture.
Also affects other people.
No, there's something else. No, I'm saying something else.
We take a lower level.
We take a lower level shower. We go into our shower in our bed, in our bathroom. 3 minutes later, you're out. And so it's a standard. So it became this what?
Okay, that's what.
The shagul chametz.
Shower that's once a week, it's once a week.
No, I hear you.
What is this shower?
You're making a good point.
We're not taking a real shower. We're taking fun. Right.
So let me,
So it's not the funokim. We're not thinking.
I hear. I'll tell you why you need to approach this sugya, with extreme caution. Because the Shulchan Aruch, and we didn't read this yet, says this Shiloh we're dealing with, Alter Rebbe brings in Sif Aleph. Those who want to really get a good overview of the sugya, Alter Rebbe and Tov Kafid Aleph Sif Aleph, as a summary of this whole sugya. I didn't bring the Alter Rebbe inside for Alter Rebbe, but essentially you're dealing with the question of an Isser Min HaTorah. It's a machlokes. The Rambam takes the more lenient approach. The Yeshcholkin, the Tosfos, the Rosh, and the Riva hold that if it's not a universal need to heat up water on Yontif is an Isser Min HaTorah. And the Ramah and the Alter Rebbe conclude that a person should be choishish for this opinion with the stringencies involved. So we can mention different svaras, which I'm not saying they're wrong, and there's room to apply them. And as we'll see at the end of the shir, that there's types of showers that you can take that even the Tosfos would allow, like lukewarm showers that hopefully we'll get to. But
My point isn't that whether you should. That's not funuk. But to say that the Chachamim established what's mefunuk and what's a shower, because the Chachamim said a shower is a mefunuk, so therefore that's it. The shower is a mefunuk. That doesn't. You have to compare apples to apples. That's like a closed-minded, Chachamim said shower is a mefunuk. Now it's a mefunuk. You have to look at the realities. Everyone wants a shower. Is what are people doing? You have to. Let's go in the 9 days. I think it's taken 2023. I want to know which place are really going to say that you're not allowed to take a shower in 2023 in the 9 days. Why would call not? So guys, everyone's taking showers because this is Breibrak. Because in Breibrak, it's not the cup. A quick shower, the way you take a good. So in other words, the bottom line is most people tell you, look, go in the shower, rinse yourself off, don't sit in there in the 9 days, right? You have to use seichel. You can't go in there and sit in a boiling hot shower for 20 minutes in the 9 days. No one's going to tell you that. But to rinse off, because that's not a shower. It's just a shower.
Fine. Okay, so but once we have Tosfos in the Rosh and the Riva, obviously this is not a 9-day shiloh. This is the shiloh of a day and you have to approach this with extreme cautions. That's the point I want to make. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. The Betzalel have an interest. This is a similar svara in source 19 about. He says it a little. I think he says it a little better than the Nissen Karelitz. But we'll get to that soon. I mean, he says that you can't play games over here, and to know how to change things, you have to do it very carefully. Yeah.
I'm not
Fine, but yeah,
I'm not saying that they go take showers in Yom Tov.
Okay.
You have to come with
I agree. In source 15, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was asked by his Talmud, the author of the Shmini Shabbos Kolchas, Rabbi Newbort, an interesting question that Neubert, thank you. So
we're Americans.
So he asked, what about, and it gives you an interesting flavor for this whole shiloh. He asked, what about if you have dirt on other parts of your body? Let's say you fall and slip, and we were going rock climbing yesterday for Chol Hamoed, and you get chalk all over yourself. So let's say you get I don't know, we're allowed to go rock climbing on Chol Hamoed. So you get your
you're allowed to shower.
So you get a blue.
Won't take us now to say that.
We'll have to have a separate share for Chol Hamoed. So And as Yisrael, you're much schwitzier than Pittsburgh, at least where it's not so hot outside. So he says, so what about if it's not the face, it's not the hands, and so on and so forth? Could you take a shower? Interestingly, someone was asking me, and I looked it up. So what's the definition of the hands? The Shulchan Shlomo in source 21 already he asked this question, but he's not sure what the answer is. But is the hand just this part of the hand, or is it the arm as well? So in source 21, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is Mesupik, but in the Dirshu version of the Mishnah Brura, he quotes over there from the Rashba in his commentary in the Gemara and Shabbos. He says, no, it's specifically this part of the hand. So let's say over here you get a splurge of dirt in this part of the hand. Could you wash it or not? And he says, well, maybe because if it's going to be universally, everyone's going to take hot water and wash their hand if they get a big splotch of dirt, it's going to be considered universal. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach made a counter argument, and he's Nisha B'Tzarachion. He says, no, it could be because that only happens on rare occasions. It's not considered universal. Even if everyone's going to wash their hands, they get a big blotch of dirt on their arm. That everyone's going to do. It's still not going to be considered a universal need to allow you to take hot water and heat it up on Yom Tov and so on and so forth. Because he's like a chaylas, that's a one-off, and therefore that wouldn't be considered universal. And he's not sure about that case.
You can't make your whole body other than agro.
Right. Interestingly, Stam, this din in Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Tefillah, we learned this in the past semester of Smichas Chaver. Many people don't know. If you want to make an argument to go into the mikveh every day, or many people that wake up in the morning, they wash their face, they wash their hand, they think they're all good. When in the Shulchan Aruch, you're supposed to wash your feet before davening. So well, at least you're gonna take a bath. When you go to the mikveh, you get that. But people that just brush their teeth and throw some water on their face, Shulchan Aruch. You're saying because Amalvi used to wash, but it's like the Kohen used to wash his hands. Or you have the Viraglov, so there's more. It's not just that as well. Okay, so now let's get into the language of the Alter Rebbe, the way he addresses this need, and Rabbi Oberlander uses this Alter Rebbe to define need. But let's put it in context. So the Shulchan Aruch, a couple paragraphs later in the same siman, talks about lighting a fire for smells. I'll just tell you, my Shver Rabbi Weinstein, every year he comes up with new scientific methods to removing mosquitoes and insects from the sukkah. I think last year we had this huge contraption in the side of the sukkah that was the latest thing on the market. It didn't work. But this year's discovery was Listerine and some other lavender. So we the whole sukkah smelled like lavender and Listerine. I think it could be a word. I'm not sure. But so it worked for people. So people appreciated good smells, and there was a whole malacha to heat up to add smells to your sukkah. So could you do that? So the Shulchan Aruch says you can't. That's not considered a universal need. Lighting a fire just to add incense into your sukkah is not allowed. Fine. But if you're adding it to improve the smell of your food, that would be permissible. The scent of your food, and if we go back to the chinuch, that actually makes sense, or that actually could be explained with the chinuch. The chinuch says when it comes to food, it doesn't have to be a universal need. It could be anything that you're doing to enhance the food is permissible. Okay, so the Rebbe talks about that in Sif Hey, and he talks it out, and his Lashonis give a little hagdara for the level of tzarech that would be required. Lefi shehanazu shel tama b'samim einit tzricha l'chol nefesh ela hamunogim umufunokim bilvad. Only for those, he adds in both Lashonos from all the Rishonim, those that are extra finicky and need extra pleasures, and it's only for those. What?
Finicky comes from the funokim.
Funokim, yeah. So it's munogim, pleasure and mufunik. And that would be where it would not be needed. ולא התירה התורה לעשות שום מלאכה למלאכה שכל נפש, אלא לדבר שהוא צורך לכל נפש, שנאמר אך אשר יאכל לכל נפש. The pasuk says lechol, and therefore it has to be universal, and it's needed across the board. So to give another practical example, the Biur Halacha talks about smoking. And the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch has a long list of, you're going to smoke on Yom Tov, all the things you have to be careful for. The real from Jews, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says they have to cross off the words on the cigarettes, they don't burn the cigarette, and you have to light it from, you can't light it from a match that you're going to throw away, because on Yom Tov you have two malachas. There's the malacha of, there's two simonim in Shulchan Aruch. There's Tav Kuf Yud Aleph and Tav Kuf Yud Dalet. Tav Kuf Yud Aleph is making a fire. Tav Kuf Yud Dalet is not extinguishing a fire. So the halachas of making a fire are more lenient than extinguishing a fire. Why? Because when it comes to making food, making a fire is more important. Extinguishing is only considered machshirei oichel nefesh. There what? Ma'arat Shabbos. Right. So the Biur Halacha over here quotes some of the Mishnah. What? Yeah, so it goes by the locality.
When it's necessary.
So interestingly, about smoking, the poskim point out, and Rabbi, if I can quote Rabbi Karelis again. Okay. So he says, interestingly, because many people smoke to help their digestion, therefore becomes a need. People are very uptight in Bnei Brak, so they need. I don't smoke, but I've heard from smokers that smoking helps relax you, which basically helps you digest and go to the bathroom. So therefore, some of the contemporary poskim say that if they want to make an argument for why smoking is allowed, this is an additional added factor. So if you were to use cigarettes as I want to make sure speaking to the right audience here. If you're going to use cigarettes as the example, which the poskim do in this discussion, is it a universal need? So maybe 50 years ago, in a certain community, it was a universal need. But if people just smoked for pleasure, or if then maybe not. According to Shmuel, perhaps if people were to be able to afford cigarettes and everyone would enjoy them, you can take it a little further. But if we had to come away with a Haggadah, it does appear.
What's the deal that we have here?
So the Alter Rebbe seems to be slightly more lenient. He says that to make it not oichel nefesh, you need two negatives. It has to be he seems to be saying that to take it out of the shavu l'chol nefesh, it needs to be that it's only for these people. So but it is clear that shavu l'chol nefesh is something that's not just a pleasure, it's something that's a need, and it needs to be that it seems to be that according to most poskim, it has to be a need, not just a want, even by the significant minority, and not just something that fancy people do. Probably it doesn't have to be daily, but it has to be often enough to allow you to do this event on this day. So what we see over here is, again, the picture, the only picture I want you to come away with is that it's not clear. Is that the definition of universal need is not clear. It's not clear if it has to be daily. It's not clear the level of the need. It's not clear, what changed these days or not. And that's the point the Betzalel Dayan in source 19 makes. He says that he doesn't talk this out, but the background of this halacha, you're dealing with something that according to many Rishonim is an Isra Menat Torah. So therefore, Piskei Chazal lo yishtanu. Also lechapesh the psukim of Chazal, you can't just change them off the cuff. But also, you can't find paths to jump over the words of Chazal. I don't want to go after thinking for some heter. If an individual person is in a situation where he needs the hot shower, he should approach his Rav on a case-by-case basis to deal with this shayla. And that's basically the conclusion of Rabbi Badia Yosef, the Nittig Avriel, Moshe Sternbuch, temporary Rav. When I spoke to Rabbi Brian about this, I'll just tell you something interesting. I think this was 2 years ago. So on his website, well, actually, no, that conversation with Rabbi Brian comes to the next section. So he changed the wording of his website based on our conversation. At least he told me he would. But we'll get to that in a second. But Rabbi Brian, Rabbi Oberlander, I'm sure Rabbi Rosenfeld, any Rav that you're going to speak to today, not in the non-modern Orthodox world, is going to say that taking a hot shower on Shabbos is a problem. On Yom Tov is a problem. So what you could do, and we're going to get now to modern application. So this is an important detail. So you're now in a situation where you want to wash your hands with hot water. You want to wash your face with hot water Yom Tov morning. So what should you do? So the Mishnah Berurah in source 22 quotes from the Beis Yosef that you can't do this in the shower. You can't turn on the hot water in the shower and wash your hands and your head. Why? Because he says in the second line, because you might come to washing your whole body. Okay. Now, a fascinating shaila that the Biur Halacha quotes in Machlekes Rishonim about in source 23. The Alter Rebbe doesn't get into this. If you look at this shaila in the Alter Rebbe, you probably could make some diyukim, but it's not clear in the Alter Rebbe. Could you wash less than 50% of your body with hot water? The Alter Rebbe says, quotes the Shulchan Aruch, that you can wash your face, your hand, and your feet. And then at the end, he says that you can't wash your whole body with hot water. Well, what about if it's somewhere in the middle where it's less than half your body? So the Biur Halacha quotes a Machlekes Rishonim about that. And he quotes many Rishonim, Tosfos, the Mordechai, the Chinuch, and says, the chutz miponov yodav v'raglov, you can't do. Then he says, found a Rashba that said, as long as it's less than half of your body, you could, and he is nishur b'tzorachiyum. The Kaf HaChaim is noita lahokil about this question on washing less than 50% of your body. And interestingly, I saw, and we're going to now get into some modern applications of this question with modern boiler systems. But if essentially you turn on the hot water to wash your hands, and then you're like, you know what, I want to wash my neck as well, because when you turned on the hot water, you turned it on for your hands. So the place can say that if you need, you can also wash less than 50% of your body once you're turning on the hot water to wash your hands. But Frat, in today's boiler systems, which you'll see, has a number of significant leniencies, as we'll discuss in a second. So this is actually one part of the sugya that would require its own shear, just to discussing the halachas of grama, which is a super involved sugya, which needs a lot of, you got to take it piece by piece. But
what about they say today's showers? Anyways, no, showers are more or less like you talk about Aver. They say today's shower is already considered Aver because
So actually we skipped one detail. Let's go back to source 20. And those who want to see the full sugya, see the Alter Rebbe. But so the first question was regarding washing just your head, your feet, and your hands. What about washing your whole? What about washing more than that? So the Shulchan Aruch says, "Abaloi kol gufay afilu ein rebavas." So this prohibition, so at least according to the Rambam, it's an issue that Rabbanon. The issue of a shower is even if you're not going to wash your whole body at one time, there still is an issue to take a shower. And according to the second opinion that says it's minat Torah, it could be even he would hold that even if it's not b'vasachas, it's not like you're jumping into a bath or the water is coming on you at one time. Even that could be an issue minat Torah for water that was heated just for hot water. The second opinion, hot water that was heated on Yom Tov. What? Cold water. So we're going to talk about cold water in a second. What?
Washing your hair, probably stuff it off.
So with washing your hair, it's not different. There's gezeda, it's connected to the issue of cold water. Obviously, when you dry your hair, even when you allow you to wash your face, you have to dry your hair carefully, the way you would dry it on Shabbos, when you go to the mikveh, not rubbing it strongly, just kind of putting your towel on it, because it's nearer kischita. But in the interest of time, let's just go over this last point. The yesh oisrim that Amal then brings, that there are those that say it's also even with water that was heated before Yontif. So the first opinion says the water was heated before Yontif. I didn't go there so much because it's not really so practical in our systems. The water that was heated before Yontif, so then you could wash, according to the first opinion, your whole body, not together. Second opinion says even that would not be allowed, and that's the custom that the Ramah says we should follow. So less than 50%, we said there's room to be makel. So the Shmir Shabbos Kolchosa quotes his conversations with the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach about two interesting questions regarding today's modern boiler systems. So you're allowed to turn on your hot water to wash your hands. It's mutter, no questions asked, on Yontif. But when you turn on a boiler system, you end up causing a flame to go on. So even though we say you're allowed to cook water on Shabbos, you're allowed to heat up water on Shabbos, but we know that the Chachamim said you're not allowed to light a new flame on Shabbos. In today's boiler systems, a light goes on, so it's an issue of moiled. So how can we paskin that you're allowed to turn on hot water to wash your hands? Yes, there's no issue of washing, but there's an issue of moiled, of igniting a new flame. So the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says that this would not be an issue. Why? So he says, because this malacha of turning on a new flame on Yontif is an issue that Rabbanan of moiled, and you're not you don't have, it's just happening. It's a grama, meaning you don't want it, and it's a delayed act. It's a delayed effect. So it's a grama, doesn't happen directly. Therefore, a grama by the Rabbanan is mutter, and therefore to turn on. What? So there are different types of heaters, but some of them the pilot goes off and then goes on. Particularly now, I think the newer systems, I discussed it 6 months ago with some technicians. I think many of the newer systems to save energy, they actually go off more. They go off completely, and then they go on when they're needed.
It ignites a fire.
It ignites a fire. So therefore, because you're dealing on Yontif with a grama by a Rabbanon, therefore it's permissible. Then in source 25, he asked another question. He says, "What happens if at the end of Yontif you turn on the hot water? What happens is more water, cold water is going into the boiler system. So you're essentially preparing, you're being mechen for the next day, which according to many opinions in Shulchan Aruch, it's an isim and a toida of hachana for the next day Yontif, potentially if you're dealing with a malacha." So over there, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says that he said that would be permissible. He says because this is the way that the machine works, and you're preparing for Yontif, you're preparing food now. So if we were to say you can't turn on hot water, it would be impossible to prepare food. Because this is the way our water system works, this is part of the Eichel Nefesh, and therefore it's permissible. Others say another interesting svara, that the water that's going in is essentially to prevent the pot from not being destroyed. So therefore, the water that's going in is really affecting you to not destroy your system. So it's a dover hovid and other interesting links.
You don't care if you really don't care if the water goes back in and heats itself back up.
Correct. So it's for sure malach Hashem it's for legufa.
Right.
And it's for sure
You would know.
it's for sure, it's a line but it's an issue that I'm on. So if you have grama, that's fine. So others say over here it's a double grama. So if you know the way it works, there's one, you turn the water, which affects something else. That's the Bar Moshe has a long tshuva. He says it's a double grama, and there are some poskim that again, don't take this, don't try this at home. But the Eretz Tzvi has a whole tshuva why he wants to permit this on Shabbos as well. But most places do not follow that. But there, what? Tzvi Pesach Frank.
No, I'm saying.
What? Yeah. Okay, so I'll conclude with one very last, probably the most important part of the shir. This is the tachlis.
Just go to the mikveh and you won't need to take a shower.
What about for your wife and for your daughters and Mitzvah Shem and so here's the bottom line about that. So we actually don't have this discussion in Hilchos Yontif. This comes up in Hilchos Shabbos, and it's actually not in the Shulchan Aruch. It's only in the Magen Avraham. So the Rebbe in Siv Vav, in source 26, says that if you read Siman Shin Chavav in the Shulchan Aruch, it's permissible to take a cold shower and jump into cold water on Shabbos and on Yontif, no questions asked. The Magen Avraham quotes from the Maril that the Jewish people accepted upon themselves a stringency. That we're not going to go into cold water on Shabbos because people were playing games with merchatzoyas, like I said before, and there was a lot of hanky-panky going on in the bathhouses. So therefore, the rule became across the board that even cold showers were not allowed on Yom Tov for a list of 4 reasons, and there was actually gazetas because there's so much complication that goes into washing yourselves. Side with how to dry yourself. Side with carrying water outside of the rivers, and so on and so forth. 4 reasons the Magen Avraham quotes, the Alter Rebbe clarifies in Siv Chavav. Therefore, the Jewish people accepted upon themselves that we're not going to take not going to go swimming. We're not going to go in water. Swimming is obviously Nisa D'Rabbanan. We're not even going to go in cold water because of all the complications involved with being in the water on Shabbos. What?
Shabbos.
This is Shabbos. And the poskim say the same thing applies to Yom Tov. Although interestingly, there's a tshuva from Rabbi Moshe where he says perhaps regarding this question, Yom Tov is a little more lenient because there's 4 concerns regarding going into cold water, and some of them are involved with carrying, and carrying on Yom Tov is only Nisa D'Rabbanan. So therefore, but all the poskim across the board apply this Maril and this Magen Avraham to Shabbos and Yom Tov going in cold water. Rabbi Kiva Eger in Sif Aleph says that even if someone's not sick, but he's very uncomfortable, this din of the Maril is going to be pushed aside. So if you're very uncomfortable, one could take a cold shower because it's not a din of the Shulchan Aruch, it's a din that was invented later, and therefore that would be permissible. And the Shari Tshuva says the same thing would apply to a lukewarm water on Yom Tov. That would be he's talking about lukewarm from heated before Yom Tov, but as well to have a lukewarm shower on Yom Tov if a person's bitzar. So that was my discussion with Rabbi Brian. Rabbi Brian says a person is in extreme discomfort. I said, what about if you're just very uncomfortable? He says, yeah, very uncomfortable, and he took off the word extreme. So even if you're very uncomfortable, one would be allowed to take a lukewarm shower, or Moshe goes even a step further, as long as it's at a lower temperature than you normally take it. But most poskim are machmir, like the Shari Tshuva, that it should be a lukewarm shower. So if we're talking about Erev Yom Tov, correct. So it was a bottom line. Most poskim would tell you that if you're very uncomfortable, 2nd or 3rd day Yom Tov, you can go into warm shower. That's right. You put on the cold. So then so now in today's society that would be permissible because you're dealing with you're bringing all the grummas. Because of all the grummas, so really it's not in the same category as lighting a fire. What? Right.
Why not?
So,
by the way, Americans, you're in a shower. It's more of a pool.
One second. So
They're fine.
the we say it's an issue that I've won. The rise of the chumrah. So we don't want to disregard what Chazal said. So we have some distinction to say that Chazal was talking about hot water. So we hear this is cold. So therefore it's not what Chazal asked.
No, that's what about the issue of heating water on Yom Tov? I'm saying, why?
Come on. They have grama to deal with that.
So then why can't I just do it anyway? So this whole shit should go. We're doing groma now anyways. Our hot water is groma now anyway. So forget the whole issue over here is whether it's the gay when now it's show the whole network. We're anyways doing groma nowadays. So the whole business is not shy.
So again, the shiloh of grama is the shiloh of grama is only going to take it down to an issue that Abon. It's not going to make it mutter. So the grama would allow you to makim tsar. So you have a trade that Abon on makim tsar.
Thing is that's the we're talking about the Shabbos. So obviously I'm heating it on Shabbos. Taking patience is Isma Mitzvah. So the place on Shabbos. But on Yom Tov, we're not talking about the Gzeir Mitzvah. We're talking about the issue of heating water on Shabbos on Yom Tov. What? It's a but that's not what we did. That's not what the shir was about. That was the end of the shir. I'm asking a question. Like what's saying, like why is this going to help for everything else we did?
See, in other words, if you're already coming onto grama,
so then forget it. If you're saying that because of grama, I could take a lukewarm, which I could heat the water up for a lukewarm because it's not Gzeir Mitzvah. So let me take a hot shower, right?
the frat, according to the Debretzin, it's a grama de grama. I think at the end of the day, we're
It's a different level of still with the font. Because I'm not grabbing even in the power of the food though, they put to heating up water.
I finished up the source number 23 and I decided we're gonna go to the place come now to take a shower and I'll take a hot shower. Now to heat water for a shower. So what does it help me patient then? So I can't heat the patient, I can't get the patient then. Stated, so they're holding, so we're holding the grammar for the method choice. And that's only topic on that. But he's saying the child of the Isa, how can we take grammar from grammar for child of the Isa?
we talking that it's the Rabban. That's clear.
But
we're machmir for the opinion that it's the Isa, but we talking that it's the Rabban.
But still, no, there's also isn't the Rabban on Exeter Mercatoi, isn't the Rabban on Exeter Rabban. In other words, to say that we make on that's not Exeter Mercatoi is not the same to say that we'll be making we're doing Isra Rabban on the heating water. The two style of placement on Shabbos, what is not the same as the two style of
Something that starts off as an Eraisa. That's probably you're probably going to have to say that because it's a connected to a shalom atayra. There's stricter parameters.
What's the bottom line?
Bottom line is that go to the mitzvah. Take a shower if you're very uncomfortable. On Yom Tov. So on Yom Tov, you allow a lukewarm shower. Lukewarm, yeah. If you're very uncomfortable. Okay.
No. You have to have that star.
Sorry, yeah.
You have to have it.
What?
That would take a warm shower.
Yeah. Yeah.
not going to be a that shower for 3 minutes coming up. We go back and forth. You see the hot going the whole your life is that point. That's what it's about. Three degrees start to go to the war and you go very hot.
Very for your heart.
Also, the house is like in negative.
He comes from because that they could agree on.